The wind howled across the frozen wasteland of Colorado's San Juan mountains, with such ferocity that Samuel Brennan could barely see his own hand before his face, and he knew that anyone caught out in this blizzard would be dead by morning. He trudged through the knee-deep snow toward his barn, shoulders hunched against the biting cold that cut through even his thick wool coat and leather chaps. The ranch stretched out around him in white desolation, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. It was December 1883, and this was shaping up to be one of the worst winters Samuel had seen in his 32 years of life. He had just secured the barn door when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost dismissed it as the wind, but something made him pause. There it was again, a weak cry that barely carried over the storm. Samuel's heart lurched in his chest. No one should be out in this weather. The nearest town, Animas Forks, was a good 5 miles down the mountain, and even the most experienced miners knew better than to travel in conditions like these. Grabbing his lantern, Samuel pushed back out into the storm, following the direction of the sound. The snow stung his eyes and numbed his face, but he pressed on, calling out into the darkness. Then he saw her. A dark shape collapsed in the snow not 50 yards from his porch. He ran, his boots sinking deep with each step, his breath coming in ragged clouds. She was face down in a drift, her dark hair spread out around her head like a halo, her traveling cloak doing little to protect her from the elements. Samuel dropped to his knees beside her, his hands shaking as he turned her over. She was young, maybe in her mid-20s, with delicate features now pale as death. Ice crystals clung to her eyelashes, and her lips had taken on a blue tinge that sent panic through him. Without hesitation, Samuel scooped her into his arms. She was light, too light and completely limp. He could feel the faintest flutter of a heartbeat against his chest as he carried her toward the house, moving as quickly as he dared through the treacherous snow. The ranch house was modest but solid, built to withstand these brutal mountain winters. He kicked the door open and rushed inside, laying her gently on the thick rug before the fireplace. His fingers fumbled with the buttons of her frozen cloak. The fabric was stiff with ice, and he had to work carefully to peel it away from her body. Underneath, she wore a simple dress that was soaked through, the dark blue fabric clinging to her frame. Samuel knew he had to get her warm and dry, but propriety warred with necessity in his mind. Then she let out a small gasp, her body shuddering and propriety lost. He grabbed blankets from his bedroom and stripped away her wet clothes with clinical efficiency, trying not to think about anything except keeping her alive. Her skin was like ice beneath his fingers, and he could see the toll the cold had taken. There were no obvious injuries, but hypothermia was deadly enough on its own. He wrapped her in the blankets and pulled her closer to the fire, then set about building up the flames until they roared in the hearth. The house grew warmer, but she remained unconscious. Samuel heated water and used clean cloths to gently warm her hands and feet, knowing that too much heat too quickly could be dangerous. He had learned that lesson the hard way years ago when a fellow ranch hand had nearly lost his toes to frostbite. Slow and steady was the key to recovery. As he worked, he studied her face. Even in her current state, she was beautiful. Her features were refined, suggesting she came from some means, though her dress had been plain. Dark lashes rested against pale cheeks, and her hair, now drying in the firelight, showed hints of chestnut and copper. Who was she? What had brought her to his isolated ranch in the middle of a blizzard hours past? Samuel never left her side, monitoring her breathing and pulse, adjusting the blankets, adding wood to the fire. He made beef broth from his stores and kept it warm, hoping she would wake soon enough to take some. The storm continued to rage outside, rattling the windows and howling down the chimney, but inside the small house it was warm and safe. It was near midnight when her eyelids finally fluttered. Samuel, who had been dozing in his chair, immediately sat forward. Her eyes opened slowly, revealing irises of deep green that seemed to take in everything at once. Confusion clouded her gaze, then panic as she realized where she was and how she was dressed. "Easy now," Samuel said softly, holding up his hands. "You are safe. I found you collapsed in the snow outside my ranch. You were freezing to death. I had to get you warm." She stared at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly beneath the blankets. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse and barely above a whisper. "Where am I? My ranch, about 5 miles north of Animas Forks. I am Samuel Brennan. What is your name?" She closed her eyes for a moment, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. Marianne Bardwell." "Miss Bardwell, what were you doing out in that storm? You could have died." Tears spilled from the corners of her eyes, tracking down her temples into her hair. "I almost wish I had," she whispered, and the raw pain in her voice made Samuel's chest tighten. He reached for the broth and ladled some into a cup. "Here, drink this. You need to get your strength back, then you can tell me what happened if you want to." She struggled to sit up, clutching the blankets to her chest. Samuel helped her, propping pillows behind her back and being careful to keep his eyes on her face. Her hands shook as she took the cup, and he had to help her guide it to her lips. The first sip made her cough, but the second went down easier. Color began to return to her cheeks as she drank. "Thank you," she said when the cup was empty. "You saved my life. Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly, meeting his eyes. "Not everyone would have. Some would have left me to die, especially given my circumstances." Samuel frowned. "What circumstances are those?" Marianne took a shaky breath. "I was traveling to Denver. My father arranged a marriage for me, you see, to a man named Edward Colton, a wealthy businessman twice my age whom I had never met. I was on the stagecoach with my chaperone, Mrs. Henderson, when we were attacked by bandits 3 days ago." 3 days? Samuel's eyes widened. "You have been out in this weather for 3 days, not all in the open," she said quickly. "The bandits took our valuables and left us stranded. Mrs. Henderson and I found an abandoned mining shack and took shelter there. We had no food, no way to make a proper fire. On the second day, Mrs. Henderson said she was going to try to make it to town for help." Marianne's voice broke. "She never came back. I waited as long as I could, but the cold was unbearable and I was so hungry. I thought if I followed the road, I might find help. I must have wandered off the path in the storm." Samuel felt anger rise in his chest at the thought of those bandits leaving 2 women to die in the wilderness. "Mrs. Henderson might have made it to town," he said gently. "She could have sent help back for you, but the storm would have prevented anyone from traveling." "Maybe," Marianne said, but her tone suggested she did not believe it. "I should never have left the shack. I was foolish." "You were desperate and afraid. That is not foolish, that is human." Samuel stood and moved to the kitchen area of the open room. "You need to eat something more substantial than broth. I will make you some eggs and biscuits." As he cooked, he was acutely aware of her watching him. His home was simple, just one large room with a sleeping area partitioned off by a curtain, a kitchen corner with a cast iron stove, and the main living space with the fireplace. It was clean and well kept, but Spartan. A bachelor's dwelling through and through. "Have you lived here long?" Marianne asked. 7 years. I bought this land when I was 25, built the house with my own hands. The cattle operation is small, but it provides enough for my needs." "Do you live alone?" "I do. Had a ranch hand for a while, but he moved on last spring." "Most folks do not like the isolation up here." He plated the food and brought it to her. "Can you manage?" She nodded, taking the plate carefully. Her hands were steadier now, and she ate with obvious hunger, though she tried to maintain some semblance of manners. Samuel returned to his chair and watched the fire, giving her privacy to eat. "Why do you stay?" she asked between bites. "If it is so isolated and lonely," Samuel considered the question. "I like the quiet, the solitude. Out here, a man can be himself without the weight of other people's expectations." "That sounds wonderful," Marianne said softly. "I have spent my whole life under the weight of expectations." He looked at her then, really looked at her. In the firelight, wrapped in his blankets with her hair loose around her shoulders, she looked young and vulnerable. But there was a strength in her eyes, a determination that spoke of inner steel. "You do not want to marry this Edward Colton," he said. It was not a question. "I have never wanted anything less in my life, but my father's business is failing. Mr. Colton offered to invest a substantial sum in exchange for my hand in marriage. I am a transaction, nothing more. Your father agreed to this. My father sees it as the only way to save our family from ruin. My mother died when I was young, and I have no siblings. I am all he has to bargain with." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. Samuel felt a surge of protective anger on her behalf. A woman should not be sold like livestock. "Tell that to my father. Tell that to half the families in Boston who marry off their daughters to secure their fortunes." She set the empty plate aside. "I am sorry. You saved my life, and here I am burdening you with my troubles." "It is no burden. You have been through an ordeal. You are entitled to speak your mind." Marianne pulled the blankets tighter around herself. "What happens now? The storm shows no signs of stopping. You will stay here until it passes and you are strong enough to travel. Then I will take you to Anima's Forks. From there, you can decide what you want to do. My father will be expecting me in Denver. What you tell your father is your business, but you should make that choice when you are safe and well, not when you are recovering from nearly freezing to death." She smiled at him then, the first real smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face, brightening her eyes and softening the tension around her mouth. "You are very kind, Mr. Brennan." "Samuel," he corrected, "and I am just doing what is right." The storm continued for 3 more days. During that time, Samuel set up a privacy screen around his bed for Marianne and made himself a bedroll by the fire. He lent her some of his clothes since hers had been ruined beyond repair, and though the shirt and pants were far too large for her slender frame, she wore them with good humor, rolling up the sleeves and cuffs. They fell into an easy routine. Samuel tended to the animals each day, fighting through the snow to ensure his cattle and horses had food and water. Marianne, despite his protests, insisted on helping around the house. She cooked meals, mended his clothes, and organized his sparse pantry with surprising efficiency. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked. Samuel learned that Marianne was 24 years old and had grown up in Boston in a world of social calls and dinner parties. She loved reading and had a particular fondness for poetry. Her mother had died of consumption when Marianne was 12, and she had spent the years since managing her father's household and nursing him through his various ailments and business failures. Samuel told her about his own past, though there was less to tell. He had grown up on a farm in Kansas, the youngest of 5 children. When his parents died within a year of each other, the farm had gone to his oldest brother, and Samuel had headed west to make his own way. He had worked as a ranch hand, a miner, and even briefly as a lawman before saving enough to buy this land and start his own operation. "Do you ever regret leaving Kansas?" Marianne asked one evening as they played cards by the firelight. "Sometimes," Samuel admitted. "I miss my family, though we were never particularly close. But I do not regret building this life for myself. It may be simple, but it is mine." "That must be a wonderful feeling," she said wistfully, "to have something that belongs to you alone that you created with your own hands. You could have that too, you know. You do not have to go to Denver. You do not have to marry a man you have never met. What choice do I have? If I do not go, my father will lose everything. He will be destitute. That is his burden to bear, not yours. He made his business decisions. You should not have to sacrifice your happiness for his mistakes." Marianne laid down her cards. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You are a grown woman. You have the right to make your own choices. The world is not so kind to women who defy their families. I would be penniless, alone, without reputation or prospects." Samuel leaned forward, his blue eyes intense in the firelight. "You would be free." The word hung between them, heavy with possibility. Marianne stared at him, her lips parted in surprise. Something shifted in that moment, a recognition passing between them that neither could name but both could feel. "I should go to bed," Marianne said abruptly, standing. "Thank you for the game." She disappeared behind the privacy screen, and Samuel remained by the fire, troubled by the strength of his feelings. He had known this woman for less than a week, yet the thought of her leaving, of her marrying some man twice her age in Denver, made his chest ache with something that felt dangerously close to jealousy. He was falling for her. It was foolish and impossible, but there it was. Somewhere between finding her in the snow and watching her laugh at his clumsy attempts to cook something more sophisticated than beans and biscuits, he had lost his heart. On the fourth day, the storm finally broke. Samuel woke to bright sunlight streaming through the windows and a silence that felt almost unnatural after days of howling wind. He dressed quietly, trying not to wake Marianne, and stepped outside. The world had been transformed into a pristine white wonderland. Snow lay in deep drifts against the house and barn, and every tree branch glittered with ice crystals that sparkled like diamonds in the morning sun. He was shoveling a path to the barn when Marianne emerged, wrapped in one of his coats that nearly swallowed her whole. Her hair was braided over one shoulder, and her cheeks were pink from the cold. "It is beautiful," she breathed, looking around in wonder. "I have never seen anything like it." "Colorado winters can be harsh, but they have their moments," Samuel agreed. He leaned on his shovel, watching her. "The road should be passable in a day or two once I can dig us out and the sun has a chance to work on the drifts." Her smile faded. "Of course, you are eager to have your home back to yourself. That is not what I meant." He set the shovel aside and walked toward her. "Marianne, I want you to know that you are welcome here as long as you need. There is no rush. You have already done so much for me. I cannot impose on your hospitality any longer than necessary. It is not an imposition." He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "The truth is, I have enjoyed your company. The house feels less empty with you here." She looked up at him, those green eyes searching his face. "I have enjoyed being here. You have been kinder to me than anyone has been in a very long time." They stood close together in the snow, their breath mingling in small clouds between them. Samuel wanted to reach for her, to pull her into his arms and tell her that she could stay forever if she wanted, that he would protect her from her father and Edward Colton, and anyone else who tried to control her life. But he held himself back, aware of the line he was about to cross. "I should finish clearing the path," he said instead, stepping back. "The animals will be hungry." He worked for the rest of the morning, pushing himself hard to clear away the snow and check on his livestock. All the cattle had survived the storm, huddled together in the lee of the barn. His 2 horses, a sturdy mare named Bess and an older gelding called Thunder, greeted him with soft whinnies and eager nosing for treats. When he returned to the house for lunch, he found Marianne had prepared a meal of salt pork, beans, and cornbread. She had also heated water for washing, and the house smelled of soap and cooking. "I took the liberty of washing some things," she said, gesturing to where his shirts hung drying near the fire. "I hope you do not mind." "Of course not, thank you." He washed his hands and face in the basin she provided, then joined her at the table. "You did not have to go to all this trouble." "It is no trouble. I like keeping busy." She served him a generous portion and poured coffee for them both. "Besides, you have been working so hard all morning. The least I can do is provide a hot meal." As they ate, Samuel found himself memorizing the small details of this moment. The way the sunlight caught in her hair, turning it to burnished copper. The delicate way she held her coffee cup. The slight smile that played at the corners of her mouth when she caught him watching her. He wanted to hold on to this, to preserve it somehow, because he knew it could not last. After lunch, Marianne suggested they go for a walk. The sun was bright and the air, while cold, was still and pleasant after days of being confined indoors. Samuel showed her around his property, pointing out the boundaries of his land and explaining his plans for expansion. "I want to increase the herd next spring," he told her as they walked along the fence line. "Maybe add some chickens too for fresh eggs. There is a good market for beef in the mining camps, and the railroad is talking about extending the line up this way." "You have thought it all through," Marianne observed. "You have a clear vision for your future. A man needs something to work toward. Without that, what is the point?" She was quiet for a moment, her mittened hands clasped before her. "What if your vision included more than just cattle and chickens? What if it included a family?" Samuel's heart began to pound. "I suppose I have always thought that might happen someday. The right woman would have to be willing to put up with the isolation, though. Not many women would want this life. I think you might be surprised. Some women might find the peace and freedom of this place worth more than all the social events and fine dresses in the world." They had reached a small rise that overlooked the valley below. From here, they could see for miles, the snow-covered mountains rising in the distance, the frozen creek winding through the property, the ranch house sitting solid and safe in its clearing. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," Marianne said softly. Samuel was not looking at the view. "Yes," he agreed, "it is." She turned to him and found him watching her. Color rose in her cheeks, and for a long moment they simply stood there, the cold forgotten, the rest of the world falling away. "Marianne," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I have no right to ask this, and you can tell me to mind my own business, but what do you want? Not what your father wants, not what society expects, but what do you want for your life?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I want to be free. I want to make my own choices, live my own life. I want to wake up each morning and feel joy instead of dread. I want to matter to someone, not for what I can provide or what use I can be, but for who I am." "You matter to me," Samuel said. He reached for her hand, his large, rough fingers engulfing her smaller ones. "I know we have not known each other long, but these past few days with you have meant more to me than years of living alone. When I think about you leaving, about you marrying that man in Denver, something inside me just rebels against it." "Samuel," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks now. "I am not a rich man. I cannot offer you fine dresses or a grand house or servants, but I can offer you this ranch, this life, and a promise that I will spend every day trying to make you happy, if you want it, if you want me. Are you asking me to marry you? I am. I know it is fast, I know it is crazy, but yes. Marry me, Marianne. Stay here with me. Build a life with me." She pulled her hand from his, and for a terrible moment Samuel thought she was going to refuse. Then she threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him over with the force of her embrace. "Yes," she said against his shoulder. "Yes, yes, yes." Samuel wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight against him. Relief and joy flooded through him in equal measure. He pulled back just enough to see her face, and what he saw there made his breath catch. She was looking at him with such open affection, such trust, that he felt humbled by it. "I love you," he said, because it was true and because he needed her to know it. "I know it is soon, but I do. I love you." "I love you too," she whispered back. "I think I have loved you since you carried me in from the snow." He kissed her then, his cold lips meeting hers in a moment of perfect warmth. It was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened into something more passionate as weeks of loneliness and longing found their release. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, their faces flushed with more than just the cold. "We should get back to the house," Samuel said, his voice husky. "Plan our next steps." They walked back hand in hand, and the ranch house looked different to Samuel now, not just his solitary refuge, but a home waiting to be filled with love and laughter. Inside, they sat together on the sofa before the fire, and Samuel held Marianne close as they talked about the future. "We will need to go to Anima's Fork soon," he said. "Find a preacher willing to marry us. I want to do this proper, Marianne. I want you to be my wife in every way that matters." "What about my father? What about Mr. Colton?" "Send a telegram to your father telling him you are safe but have decided not to continue to Denver. You are a grown woman. He cannot force you to marry against your will. He will be so angry. He was counting on that money from Mr. Colton." "Then he should not have gambled his fortune on poor business ventures. His choices are not your responsibility." Samuel cupped her face in his hands. "I mean what I said, Marianne. You are free to choose your own path. If that path leads back to Boston, I will understand. But if it leads here to me, then I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." "I could never regret it," she said fiercely. "Being here with you, this is the first time in my life I have felt like I can truly breathe, like I can be myself without apology or explanation." "Then stay, be my wife, be my partner, help me build something real and lasting here." "I will. I am yours, Samuel Brennan, if you will have me. Forever," he promised, sealing it with another kiss. 2 days later, when the roads were passable, Samuel hitched Thunder to his small wagon and drove Marianne into Anima's Forks. The town was barely more than a collection of buildings clinging to the mountainside, a mining community that swelled and shrank with the fortunes of the ore deposits. But it had a general store, a saloon, a boarding house, and most importantly, a church with a circuit preacher who happened to be in residence. Reverend Martin was a portly man in his 50s with kind eyes and a quick smile. He listened to their story, or at least the edited version Samuel provided, and agreed to marry them that very day. "Young love should not be kept waiting," he declared. "And if you have survived being snowed in together for a week and still want to marry, well, that is a better test than most couples get." They were married in the small church with the reverend's wife and the local shopkeeper as witnesses. Marianne wore a simple dress they had purchased from the general store, pale blue with white lace at the collar. Samuel had bought a new shirt for the occasion and slicked back his hair with water. They said their vows before God and the handful of witnesses, promising to love and cherish each other until death parted them. When the reverend pronounced them man and wife, Samuel kissed his bride with such tenderness that Mrs. Martin dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief. Afterwards, they went to the telegraph office. Marianne composed a message to her father with Samuel's support, informing him that she was safe, married, and would not be continuing to Denver. She did not apologize. She did not ask for his blessing. She simply stated the facts and signed her new name with pride, Marianne Brennan. "He will be furious," she said as the telegraph operator sent the message clicking across the wires. "Let him be furious from Boston. You are beyond his reach now." Samuel squeezed her hand. "You are mine, and I take care of what is mine." They spent their wedding night at the boarding house, in a small but clean room that overlooked the main street. Samuel was gentle with Marianne, patient and loving, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Afterwards, they lay tangled together under the quilts, listening to the sounds of the town settling down for the night. "Are you happy?" Samuel asked, stroking her hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Marianne replied, snuggling closer to him. "Thank you for finding me in the snow. Thank you for saving me in every way a person can be saved. Thank you for trusting me. For taking a chance on a lonely cowboy with nothing to offer but hard work and devotion. You have everything to offer. You have yourself, and that is more than enough." They returned to the ranch the next day, and Marianne threw herself into making the house a home. She used some of the money she had been carrying for her trip to Denver, money her father had given her that she now considered hers by right, to order fabric and supplies from the catalog. She made curtains for the windows, quilts for the bed, and hooked rugs for the floor. She planted an herb garden in pots that sat on the windowsill, coaxing green life from the seeds she purchased in town. Samuel added a proper bedroom to the house that spring, building a separate room with a real door for privacy. He also expanded the barn and bought 10 more head of cattle from a rancher down the valley. Marianne proved to be a quick study when it came to ranch work. She learned to milk the cows Samuel purchased, to gather eggs from the chickens they added to their livestock, and even to ride Bess with increasing confidence. They worked side by side from dawn to dusk, building their life together one day at a time. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch Samuel had built and watch the sun set over the mountains, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. "You ever miss Boston?" Samuel asked one evening in late summer, as the aspens were just beginning to turn gold. "Not even a little bit," Marianne said honestly. "Everything I need is right here." Letters came from her father, angry at first, then pleading, then finally coldly formal. He had found another investor for his business, he wrote, and no longer required her assistance. She was dead to him as far as he was concerned. Marianne read the letter once, then consigned it to the fire. "Does it hurt?" Samuel asked gently. "Less than I thought it would. I grieved for my father's love a long time ago. This just makes it official." She looked up at him. "My real family is here now. With you." In October, Marianne realized she was with child. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when the doctor in Animas Forks confirmed it, she could barely contain her joy. She rode back to the ranch faster than was probably safe and found Samuel working on repairs to the corral. "Samuel," she called, sliding down from Bess before the horse had fully stopped. He dropped his hammer and ran to her, catching her around the waist. "What is it? What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is perfect. We are going to have a baby." The expression on his face was one she would treasure forever. Pure, unfiltered joy mixed with awe and a touch of fear. "A baby? You are certain?" The doctor confirmed it. "I am about 3 months along. The baby should come in early April." Samuel let out a whoop of delight and spun her around, then immediately set her down gently as if she were made of glass. "I should not have done that. Are you all right? Do you need to sit down? Should you even be riding?" Marianne laughed at his sudden nervousness. "I am pregnant, not fragile. Women have babies every day and manage just fine. But yes, I should probably take it easier as I get further along." That winter was even harsher than the previous one, but the house was warm and their pantry was well stocked. Samuel would not let Marianne do anything he considered too strenuous, which led to good-natured arguments about what constituted appropriate activity for an expectant mother. "I am perfectly capable of hanging laundry," Marianne insisted one day in January as her belly swelled with their growing child. "I know you are capable. I just want to help. Let me take care of you." Samuel took the basket from her hands. "Please." She relented because she could see how much it meant to him. He was terrified, she realized. Terrified of losing her, of losing the baby, of all the things that could go wrong. So she let him fuss and hover, and in return she loved him even more for caring so much. On a cold April night, with snow still on the ground despite the promise of spring, Marianne went into labor. Samuel rode like the devil himself was chasing him to fetch the midwife from town, a stern woman named Mrs. Cooper, who had delivered half the babies in the county. She arrived to find Marianne timing her contractions with calm efficiency, though Samuel was white as a sheet. "First-time fathers," Mrs. Cooper said with a knowing smile. "Always the most worried. Go boil some water and stay out of my way, Mr. Brennan." The labor lasted through the night and into the next day. Samuel paced the main room, listening to Marianne's cries and feeling utterly helpless. Every sound from the bedroom made him flinch, and more than once he started toward the door, only to be turned back by Mrs. Cooper's stern voice. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, a new sound filled the house. The thin, reedy wail of a newborn baby. Samuel rushed to the bedroom door but stopped when Mrs. Cooper emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. "You have a son, Mr. Brennan. A healthy boy with a good set of lungs on him. Marianne, is she all right? She is tired but well. She is asking for you." Samuel entered the bedroom to find his wife propped up against pillows, sweaty and exhausted but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. He approached slowly as if in a dream and looked down at the small red face of his son. "He is perfect," Marianne whispered. "Look at him, Samuel. We made him." Samuel sank onto the edge of the bed, his eyes burning with tears he did not bother to hide. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. I cannot believe this is real." "What should we name him?" Marianne asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Samuel knew. "Thomas," he said. "After my father, Thomas Samuel Brennan." "Thomas," Marianne repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to your home." The baby let out a small, mewling cry and Marianne adjusted him to nurse. Samuel watched in amazement as his wife and son bonded in this most primal way. His family, his wife and child. The lonely cowboy who had found a woman dying in the snow now had more riches than he had ever dreamed possible. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Samuel's careful management and hard work paid off, and they were able to add a second room to the house, this one for Thomas. Marianne proved to be an excellent mother, patient and loving, but also firm when needed. She taught Thomas his letters from her precious few books, and made sure he understood the value of kindness and hard work. 2 years after Thomas was born, Marianne gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Grace. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin. Then came another son, William, and finally another daughter, Elizabeth. The house that had once been so silent and lonely was now filled with the noise and chaos of family life. Samuel and Marianne worked as partners in everything. They made decisions together about the ranch, about their children's upbringing, about their future. The love that had sparked between them in those early days of being snowbound together had only deepened with time, growing into something solid and unshakable. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Marianne with a trip back to Anima's Forks, just the two of them. His sister-in-law from town, a woman who had become close friends with Marianne over the years, agreed to watch the children for a few days. They stayed at the same boarding house where they had spent their wedding night, and after a quiet dinner, Samuel presented Marianne with a small package. "What is this?" she asked, turning the wrapped parcel over in her hands. "Open it and see." Inside was a leather-bound journal, the pages crisp and empty. On the first page, Samuel had written in his careful script, "The story of us." "I thought you might like to write it all down," he said. "Everything that happened. How we met, how we fell in love, how we built this life, so the children will know and their children after them." Marianne's eyes filled with tears. "It is perfect. You are perfect. I am far from perfect, but I try my best for you." She set the journal aside and took his face in her hands. "Do you remember what I said on our wedding night? That you saved me in every way a person could be saved?" "I remember. I want you to know that is still true. Every single day I wake up next to you is a gift. Every moment we spend together, raising our children, working on the ranch, just sitting together in the evening. It is all more than I ever dreamed I could have. I feel the same way. When I think about what my life would have been if I had not gone out in that storm, if I had not found you. The thought is unbearable. But you did find me, and I found you, and everything else followed from that one moment of grace." They made love that night with the same passion and tenderness they had shared a decade earlier. Their bodies familiar but no less exciting, their connection deeper than ever. As the years passed, the children grew. Thomas became a skilled rancher like his father, learning to read the weather and the cattle with an almost uncanny ability. Sarah was wild and free, more comfortable on horseback than anywhere else. William had his mother's love of books and learning, spending hours poring over the volumes that now filled the shelves Samuel had built. Elizabeth was the baby, spoiled by everyone, but with a kind heart that made her beloved by all who knew her. Samuel and Marianne grew older together, silver creeping into their hair, lines forming around their eyes from years of laughter and hard work under the Colorado sun. The ranch continued to thrive, expanding to encompass more land as they bought out neighbors who decided the mountain life was too harsh. One evening in late summer, when Samuel was 55 and Marianne 47, they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains they had called home for more than 20 years. Their children were all inside, the older ones helping with dinner while the younger ones played. The sound of their laughter drifted out through the open windows. "You ever wonder what happened to Mrs. Henderson?" Marianne asked suddenly. Samuel looked at his wife in surprise. She rarely mentioned those dark days before she came into his life. "Sometimes. Do you?" "I think about her sometimes. I hope she made it to town safely, that she lived a good life. She was kind to me during our journey, even though she was as frightened as I was. Maybe we could ask around next time we are in town. Someone might know what became of her." "Maybe," Marianne agreed. "I would like to think she found happiness too." They made inquiries and discovered that Mrs. Henderson had indeed made it to Anima's Forks, though she had suffered severe frostbite and lost 3 toes in the process. She had sent men back to look for Marianne, but the storm had prevented them from leaving until it was too late. Believing Marianne dead, Mrs. Henderson had telegraphed her father with the tragic news. She had eventually married a widowed miner and lived in Silverton until her death, 5 years earlier. Marianne was saddened to learn of her death, but glad that the woman had found some measure of happiness. She also understood now why her father had been so coldly formal in his later letters. He had believed her dead, only to learn she was alive and married to someone else. His pride must have been deeply wounded. "You want to write to him?" Samuel asked. "Let him know you think of him, maybe try to reconcile." Marianne considered it for a long moment, then shook her head. "No. That chapter of my life is closed. He made his choice when he tried to sell me off to save his business. I have no anger toward him anymore, but I have no desire to reconnect either. My family is here, with you and our children." Samuel respected her decision, as he respected all her decisions. Their partnership was built on mutual trust and understanding, and it had only grown stronger with time. When Thomas turned 21, he announced his intention to marry a young woman from Lake City, a teacher named Rachel who had come west from Ohio. Samuel and Marianne gave their blessing gladly, and the wedding was held at the ranch with half the county in attendance. It was a joyous celebration, and as Samuel danced with Marianne under the stars, he marveled at how far they had come. "Our son is married," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are getting old. Speak for yourself," Marianne teased, though her own hair was now more silver than chestnut. "I feel young as ever when I am with you, flatterer, truth-teller." He kissed her then, in front of all their guests, a long, sweet kiss that spoke of enduring love and abiding commitment. Their children groaned good-naturedly at the display, but Samuel did not care. Let the whole world know how much he loved his wife. The ranch continued to be passed down through the generations, with Thomas and Rachel eventually taking over day-to-day operations as Samuel and Marianne slowed down. But Samuel never fully retired. He could not imagine not working the land, not tending to the animals, not watching the sun rise over his mountains. On a crisp autumn morning, when Samuel was 68 years old, he and Marianne took a walk together to the spot where he had first proposed all those years ago. The rise overlooked the valley, now dotted with their cattle and bordered by fence lines that stretched as far as the eye could see. "You remember standing here?" Samuel asked, holding Marianne's hand. "Do you remember what I asked you?" "Of course I remember. I remember every word, every feeling. I was so scared and so hopeful all at once. I was terrified you would say no, that you would choose to go back to your old life. There was never any choice to make. My heart chose you the moment you carried me in from the snow." She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." "As would I. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Marianne Brennan. And you are mine, Samuel Brennan." They stood there for a long time, watching the land they had built together, surrounded by the family they had created. It was not the life either of them had been born into, but it was the life they had chosen. And in that choice, they had found more happiness than either had dreamed possible. Years later, when the children and grandchildren gathered for holidays and celebrations, they would ask Samuel and Marianne to tell the story of how they met. And they would sit together, hands clasped, and tell the tale of a blizzard and a lonely cowboy and a woman who collapsed in the snow outside his ranch. And then Grandpa carried Grandma to safety. The youngest grandchildren would chorus, having heard the story many times. "That he did," Marianne would agree, smiling at her husband. "He carried me to safety and to love, the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." "The gift was mine," Samuel would insist. "Finding you was like finding the missing piece of myself I did not even know was lost." And their children and grandchildren would roll their eyes at the old people's sentimentality, but secretly treasure these stories, understanding that they were witnessing something rare and precious. True love that had endured through decades of hardship and triumph, that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. When Samuel was 73, he took ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. Marianne nursed him through it with the same fierce determination she had brought to everything in her life, and though he was weak for months afterward, he recovered. "You are not leaving me yet," she told him sternly when he joked about checking out early. "We have a deal, remember. Together until the end. I do not care if that is tomorrow or 20 years from now, but it will be together." "Yes, madam," he agreed meekly. then grinned. "You are still the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, you know that. And you are still the most silver-tongued liar in Colorado. But I love you for it." They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by 4 children, 11 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. The ranch had expanded to include not just cattle, but also horses that Thomas bred and trained. The family had become pillars of the community, respected for their hard work and integrity. At the party, held in the large barn they had built 10 years earlier, their oldest grandson gave a toast. "To Grandpa Samuel and Grandma Marianne," young Samuel Thomas said, raising his glass, "who have shown us all what true love looks like. May we all be lucky enough to find what you found in each other." "Hear, hear," the crowd chorused, and Samuel pulled Marianne close, kissing her temple. "We did all right, did we not?" he murmured in her ear. "We did more than all right. We did magnificently." As the party continued around them, Samuel reflected on the unlikely path his life had taken. If someone had told him 40 years ago that the half-frozen woman he found in the snow would become the center of his universe, the mother of his children, the partner of his soul, he would have thought them crazy. But life had surprised him in the best possible way. Marianne had brought light and laughter into his solitary existence. She had filled his house with love and his days with purpose beyond mere survival. She had given him children and grandchildren, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. But more than that, she had given him herself, completely and without reservation. And that gift had made all the difference. The winter when Samuel turned 76 was mild, with less snow than usual. He and Marianne spent the cold months much as they had spent the previous 43 winters, together by the fire, playing cards and raiding and simply enjoying each other's company. Thomas and Rachel now lived in the main house with them, taking care of the day-to-day work while Samuel advised and supervised as much as his aging body allowed. One February evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Marianne and Samuel bundled up and took a walk despite the cold. It had become their tradition, these sunset walks, a way to end each day together. They walked slowly, both of them feeling their age now, but still hand in hand as they had been for more than 4 decades. The snow crunched beneath their boots, and their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. "You remember the first time we took this walk?" Marianne asked. "When you showed me the property and told me your plans for expansion, I remember. You were wearing my 2 large clothes and looked like a child playing dress-up." Samuel smiled at the memory. "But even then, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. You told me you wanted to add chickens. You were so earnest about those chickens. And we did add them, and you complained about them for the first 6 months. They were messy creatures, still are." But she was smiling. "I would not trade a single moment of this life, Samuel. Not the chickens, not the hard winters, not the struggles. All of it was worth it to be here with you." "I feel the same, my love. You took a lonely cowboy and gave him everything he never knew he needed." They stood together watching the last light fade from the sky, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life of meaning and purpose. When the cold finally drove them inside, they went together, as they always had and always would. Samuel lived to be 81 years old, Marianne 73. They died within 6 months of each other, Samuel first of heart failure in his sleep, Marianne following him that autumn as the leaves turned gold. The family said she died of a broken heart, unable to go on without her beloved husband. They were buried side by side on the rise overlooking the valley, the spot where Samuel had first proposed, and where they had taken so many walks together over the years. Their headstones were simple but elegant, bearing their names and dates and a single inscription: together in life, together in eternity. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, each inheritor adding their own touches while respecting the foundation that Samuel and Marianne had built. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. But those who had known them, who had witnessed their love firsthand, knew that no myth could capture the reality of what Samuel and Marianne Brennan had shared. Theirs was a love born of crisis and choice, nurtured through hardship and triumph, and sustained by mutual respect and unwavering commitment. In the end, it was a simple story. A woman in desperate circumstances, a man with a good heart, and a moment of grace that changed both their lives forever. She had collapsed in snow outside his ranch, and he had carried her to safety. But in saving her, he had saved himself as well, finding in her the partner and companion he had not known he was missing. Their love was not perfect. They had fought and struggled, made mistakes and found forgiveness, experienced grief and celebrated joy. But through it all, they had chosen each other, over and over again, every single day. And in the end, what more could anyone ask of love than that? The ranch still stands today, though the Brennan name has long since passed from the deed. But locals still tell the story of Samuel and Marianne, the lonely cowboy and the woman he found dying in the snow, and how their chance meeting became one of the great love stories of Colorado's Wild West days. And if you stand on that rise overlooking the valley on a quiet evening when the wind whispers through the aspens and the last light is fading from the sky, some say you can still feel their presence. Two souls who found each other against impossible odds and held on tight, who built a life of purpose and meaning from nothing more than love and determination, and the courage to choose their own path. That is the legacy they left behind. Not just a ranch or a family name, but proof that love, real love, the kind that transforms and endures, is possible even in the harshest of circumstances. All it takes is two people willing to take a chance on each other, to weather the storms together, and to never let go. Samuel Brennan carried Marianne Bardwell in from the snow that December night in 1883, and in doing so, he carried both of them toward a future brighter than either could have imagined. She had been running from a life that would have crushed her spirit. He had been resigned to a solitary existence. Together, they found something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. And so their story ends where all the best love stories end, with two hearts forever joined, two lives forever intertwined, and a love that death itself could not diminish. They lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would inspire generations. In the quiet moments before sleep, when the wind howls outside and the fire crackles in the hearth, when lovers hold each other close against the cold, the story of Samuel and Marianne lives on. A reminder that sometimes salvation comes in the form of a stranger's kindness, and that love, true love, can bloom even in the frozen heart of winter, growing stronger and more beautiful with every passing year.